Jaylen Waddle's fantasy season has just come to a screeching halt. Like, not only is he behind Achane in target share, he's now behind Jonnu Smith. In the 3 games that Tua has played this season in full in weeks 1, 8, and 9, Waddle is 4th in target share at 13% behind Tyreek at 24, Achane at 21, and Jonnu at 14%. The volume is just not here. Waddle's targets per route run is easily a career low at 0.17. It's dipped 59%. His targets per route run has dipped 59% over the last 2 years, year over year. And the only thing really here in Waddle's corner is 2 things. His matchup's amazing, and this game could shoot out, but he's 4th on the team in targets, guys. I mean, it's gone from bad to worse.
What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
Yo, what is going on? Welcome back and welcome into week number 10. We have hit the double-digit weeks. I hope that you are all crushing your fantasy football leagues and gearing up for the playoff run here in week 14, week 15. Whenever your league is set up to start the fantasy championship run, I hope you are on track for that. Let's have another great week this week. As always, we're going to be going through the fantasy points projections led by our guy, Chris Wecht, who's been doing an awesome job crunching the numbers, running the projections every week. They're led by him and our team of excellent analysts. We spend a lot of time every single week, Wednesday up until kickoff, to get these things right. And I write a free start-sit article going through every single fantasy relevant player on the board, going through every single game. You can check that article out for free at FantasyPoints.com. And if you want to check out the projections, you're going to need a plan. We are 50% off right now for the rest of the season. Make sure you're getting in on the best projections in the game. Let's get to it. It's kind of a tricky week at quarterback, right? We've got 4 teams out on a bye. Always kind of condenses things just a little bit, especially at the top at quarterback. I think this week it's kind of a little bit like last week. We've got some standout games, but then some just absolute potential dumpster fire games. Generally, this is kind of a thin week at quarterback. I think at the top, it's just super simple. Again, every single week, like it always is. Lamar, Jayden Daniels, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow. I think you can throw Brock Purdy in that this week. It's a great matchup for him against Tampa Bay. So let's get started here, and we'll go through the middle of the quarterback 1 tier. Once again, I've gone 5 for 5, I think, this season on Sam Darnold. Let's go 6 for 6. It feels like we're testing fate a little bit here with the Darnold call, but hey, the efficiency is still pretty good. The deer in headlight sacks are not so good. They're definitely back, but Darnold, nearly an 8% touchdown rate, averaging 8.5 yards per attempt, and it's fueled by Justin Jefferson. Like, let's not tell a lie here. He can get open at will. And yeah, Darnold and Jefferson are just crushing man-to-man coverage. Darnold is the 5th best quarterback in fantasy football by fantasy points per dropback scored against man coverage this season. In Jacksonville, his last couple weeks played 40% man coverage with Tyson Campbell back. This season, they're the 2nd highest man-to-man coverage deployment at 41% on the year. So just an amazing spot for Darnold, amazing spot for Jefferson. We've been streaming quarterbacks against the Jags all year. You guys know the drill at this point. Jags have given up a top 12 scoring quarterback in fantasy football in 8 of 9 games. Basically, the only game they didn't was against Jordan Love, and he got hurt in that game. It's just the gift that keeps on giving, this Jags secondary. No problem going right back to Darnold. I think he's borderline must start in this spot. A similar player that I like in the same vein, passing quarterback, drop back style quarterback who's never going to scramble a day in his life, Matt Stafford. We loved him last week. He was fine. Got there 18, 19 fantasy points. It was a game that went into overtime. But again, this has just kind of been a reoccurring thing for Stafford. When he has Kupp and Nacua both on the field, he's been a really strong mid-range quarterback 1, averaging 19.6 fantasy points per game in his last 10 starts with Kupp and Nacua. That would be like just behind Burrow and Purdy this year, is like top 8 fantasy quarterback. And Miami's kind of been exposed, right? They've had a pretty easy schedule to start their season. But the last 2 weeks, they've allowed 21 more fantasy points to both Josh Allen and Kyler Murray in games that went off, right? 55 and 57 total points scored. Love that game to potentially shoot out there on Monday night. Obviously, Miami has just track speed between Achane and Tyreek Hill and Waddle, even though they're not throwing Waddle at all, to just shoot this game out. So love Darnold, love Stafford. Those are the top 2 kind of mid-range-ish quarterback one plays that I think stand out to me the most. CJ Stroud and Jared Goff, both love those guys I shouldn't say love those guys. I do love Darnold and Stafford. Like Goff and Stroud a little bit this week. Like them a little more than consensus. Let's put it that way. Goff has not thrown more than 25 pass attempts in 6 straight games. Hopefully that changes here with Houston. Hopefully being able to push a little bit. Nico Collins will not be back, but this game total, game environment looks pretty good. I'm not going crazy with Stroud and Goff and projections. We're not going crazy with those guys, but they definitely project a little bit better than normal. Stroud in particular, obviously, we've had Stroud on the sit list now for 3 weeks, 4 weeks straight without Nico. We've just been all over that. The splits without Nico are really bad for Stroud. However, game environment, pretty good. Texans offensive line has been awful, but the Lions have really struggled to get sacks and generate pressure without Aiden Hutchinson over the last couple weeks. Their sack rate has plummeted to sub 5% over the last 3 weeks without Hutch. So Stroud should be kept clean. He should be forced to throw a little bit more this week. Game environment should be closer for Goff on the other side and force him to throw a little bit more than usual. Lions are only 3.5-point favorites on the road going into Houston. And yeah, they're a significantly better team. I mean, Detroit right now is, I think, the favorite to win the NFC. They should be, at least, to go to the Super Bowl. Really good team from top to bottom, right neck and neck with San Francisco, but they're only getting 3.5 in Houston. So that to me signals that this should be a tight game. One quarterback I'm out on this week is Kyler Murray. His season has just been an absolute roller coaster. If you own Murray in any fantasy leagues, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, it's just been basically you need a long scramble from Murray, I think, at this point to get consistent rushing production. But that's the problem here. The rushing production has been anything but consistent, along with the passing, which we've been all over for weeks. Kyler has been super up and down this year. It's a little bit of both things. We'll talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. here in a minute, but it's a bad spot for Kyler. It's a little bit of both of the inconsistency as a passer, the inconsistency as a runner. I mean, he's had 383, 14, 64, 19, and 6 yards on the ground in each of his last 6 games. We'll take the weeks where he has the long scramble or gets the, rushing touchdown. But man, I mean, it's hard to come by at this point with this run heavy offense. And this is not a good spot. Jets are allowing a league low 9.7 passing fantasy points per game. If we're looking for positives here, if you absolutely have to play Kyler, if you can't, you don't have Stafford available on the waiver wire, you haven't stashed Darnold or Goff or one of these other guys as a QB2. The only thing we really have to hang our hats on this week with Murray is New York has allowed 46 rushing yards and a touchdown to Drake Maye, and then they gave up 8 for 59 to CJ Stroud last week as a scrambler. So at least there's a little bit of upside here, maybe as a scrambler, but I'm not super happy about it. One player I am super happy for long term. I'm not stoked to put him in a lineup this week by any means. It's Drake Maye. We've been all over Maye's rushing just being massively undervalued. He has 1 design carry all year, so he's getting it all done as a scrambler, but he has 19 scrambles for 197 rushing yards. He's averaging nearly right over 10 yards per carry. He's got a rushing touchdown too against the Jets. As a result, man, he's been a pretty good low-end quarterback 1. He's finished as the QB8, QB7, and QB12 in weekly scoring in the 3 full games that he's finished. He probably would have done it against the Jets with that rushing touchdown. This is a tough matchup. This is his toughest matchup yet. Jalen Johnson, that secondary, balling out. Chicago is allowing 9.8 passing fantasy points per game. That's second fewest to only the Jets. So again, not a good spot for Maye. I've been stashing him in a few leagues where I have Kyler actually because I'm so frustrated with Kyler, and it's legitimately a coin flip this week. Right now, I'm leaning Kyler just because that offense is so much better, but it's legitimately a coin flip. For the rest of the season, you're not happy to you're not going to ever be like really, really happy to put Drake Maye in a lineup. Patriots offense has been bad, but he is so underrated for our game right now. Speaking of the game, fantasy football is absolutely dominated by running backs right now. It's not just the bad run out for receivers. All of these injuries have just piled up and stacked up. Running backs have stayed healthy, and they are just getting massive shares of volume. Last week was a very run-heavy week as far as that goes in the NFL by pass rate over expectation. Only like really, truly 5 or 6 teams were actually truly pass-heavy last week. And running backs are just soaking up all those touches, man. If you look at it in our projections, it's wild this week. Out of the top 30 players in the PPR flex rankings, that's running backs, receivers, and tight ends, 19 of them are running backs. So it is a week to play running backs in your flex once again. We've been saying this all season. And it's certainly a week to favor running backs over receivers in your flex, just because the volume has been there. The depth is amazing. We will not spend any time going through the top of the board of running backs. So we'll kind of sift through the RB2s like we do every single week. I think at the top for me this week, a player that stands out that I'm trying to buy a little bit is Rhamondre Stevenson. Again, buying into Drake Maye, buying into the Patriots. This offense has a little bit of juice, right? Like they've got some serious upside. Serious upside relative to where things were, I should say. They scored a touchdown on 23% of their possessions over Drake Maye's starts. That's a significant bump up from 9% in weeks 1 through 5. So just a huge scoring uptick. The offensive line is never going to be good, guys, this season. I think we know that. But at this point, the volume has been strong here. Stevenson is back to being a bell cow now that he's over his midseason injury. 76% of the snaps over his last 2 weeks. Strong. And Chicago is not a good run defense. Really good in the secondary, but really bad on run defense. They're actually kind of a run funnel in a way, giving up 5.1 yards per carry. That's 4th most. So, Stevenson has not been by any means an efficient fantasy football player this season. He's getting there on volume, but as far as matchup goes for the Patriots, this is a good one. Looking through the rest of the RB2 pile this week, really, the top of the board is so good. We have, I got to just say, 20 running backs projected for 15 or more fantasy points. You could include Shuba and Rhamondre in that. They're both at 14.7, so they're like right there on the cusp. We were all over the Rico Dowdle buy low until Dak unfortunately got hurt. He's going to miss the next 4 weeks with this hamstring issue. Rico just was such an easy buy low last week because Zeke's just dust. Dalvin Cook is even dustier. Dowdle's coming off a 73% snap share. I believe it was easily a career and season high for him. However, it's just a huge downgrade with Cooper Rush. I think he's kind of in that flex purgatory this week. Not really somebody I'm super happy to play in the RB2 hole, but hey, we'll take that volume for the rest of the season with Dowdle. As always, David Montgomery, Brian Robinson are just among some of the low-end RB2 plays that you're always considering. I'm not saying you're going to sit Rachaad White or Bucky Irving this week, but it's another really tough matchup. Just like last week, we were saying, hey, this is, the Bucs are huge dogs going up against the Chiefs that just don't give up anything on the ground. It's kind of a similar spot this week, although to a lesser effect. At least they're at home, but the Niners just don't give up anything at all on the ground. They are just stonewalling opposing run games, 3rd fewest rushing yards per game allowed. So to me, 5th fewest rushing yards per game allowed for the 49ers. So to me, this is just kind of a similar layout where both Irving and White are flex plays. Irving has 25 carries to White's 19 over their last 3. Looking a little further down the board, Travis Etienne and Tanks Bigsby, I think, are just off the board this week. Trevor Lawrence might miss this game with a shoulder issue. So it'll be Mac Jones under center against the Eagles. Oh, boy. This backfield, we've just been on it for a month now. It's headed towards a 1A, 1B committee. Bigsby gets early down stuff. Etienne will play more and get more passing down work. But I'm just fully fading Jags backfield this week. I'm also fading Raheem Mostert again. He's just a touchdown dependent flex at this point. Devon Achane in their last 3 games played together. He's right there. Achane has 3 inside the 10 carries in the red zone. Mostert has 5. So really, he has to get a goal line carry against the Rams to get there. Javonte Williams is a sit again. Wanted to mention him again. Last week, played Baltimore. We were all over that. Said he had to get there in the passing game. He did have a nice long catch in that game, but yeah, brutal efficiency on the ground. Broncos are huge road dogs again. 8.5-point road underdogs. Chiefs are just not giving up anything here. 50.9 yards per game. Sean Payton's been saying for weeks they want to get the rookie Audric Estime involved more. It's kind of hilarious. It's become a meme in the fantasy community, basically. But I kind of do believe Sean probably wants to get a look at Estime going down the stretch. I've been saying it for the entire season. I've been very concerned about Javonte's overall volume, and right now he is 32nd among running backs in team carry share at 42%. So he cannot afford to lose any more volume. Again, running back is amazing this week. It was kind of hard to peel out some pretty good like receiver 2 and 3 plays to really highlight this week. Again, 4 teams out on bye. That kind of hurts things as well. 2 at the top that really stood out to me just going through all of my game-by-game research and then going through the projections. First one is Darnell Mooney. At this point, he's just been a really good receiver 3 flex all season, but I think this week he's deserving a little more evaluation than that. Right now, Saints are kind of becoming a really good matchup for opposing receivers. They basically had one corner, Marshawn Lattimore, where the opposing offense just like stayed away from him. Lattimore was like not getting targeted, but all their other guys were in coverage. Yeah, they just traded Lattimore away. He's now a Commander, and it just significantly made Darnell Mooney's matchup significantly easier. New Orleans is playing a ton of man-to-man coverage, 44% of the time. But man, I don't think they're gonna stick with that without Lattimore. Regardless, though, Mooney, great receiver 2 play this week with Drake London a little beat up. Just plug him into lineups. Khalil Shakir is another one of those guys, probably not a receiver 2, more of a receiver 3. Maybe a PPR receiver 2 if you squint. But Shakir is just, he has that mind meld with Josh Allen. These guys just don't mess up. And this is an awesome, awesome matchup for Shakir. When you face the Colts, you're going to get a lot of cover 3 zone. It's just what Gus Bradley does by scheme. Indianapolis calls cover 3 41% of the time. And Shakir is shredding cover 3 zones this year. He leads the team in targets per route run at 33%, leads the team in first read targets at 31%, and leads the team in yards per route run at 2.8 when facing cover 3 this season. Both Keon Coleman and Amari Cooper are beat up. Shakir should have a really strong game underneath. Probably doesn't have a ton of upside, but the floor is really good in this spot. A player I have no idea what their floor is this week, but I think has a really good ceiling is Juan Jennings. Before missing weeks 7 and 8 with a hip injury, Jennings was legitimately eating into Brandon Ayuk and Debo and Kittle a little bit. 15% target share in weeks 1 through 6. Kittle had 22%, Samuel 20%, and Ayuk at 18%. So, with Ayuk out of the picture, unfortunately has the ACL and MCL injury. There's a lot of targets kind of as, that 18 to 20%-ish range here available, even with Christian McCaffrey coming back. And oh, by the way, it's a really good matchup. Really good matchup. Jennings will work more out of the slot, I think, than Ricky Pearsall. It'd be interesting to see how that works out. But Jennings has been in the slot like 57% of the time this season, according to FantasyPoints data. And that gives him the slightly better matchup. We've been picking on slot receivers against the Bucs all year. They're giving up the second most yards per game at 98 to opposing slot receivers. I think this just kind of maybe turns into just a massive Debo game, but the Bucs secondary is terrible. They are allowing an open or wide open receiver, according to our charting, 57% of the time. It's by far the worst rate in the league. The Cardinals are at 55%. That's the second worst rate. So just a really good spot for Jennings. He's coming back from this hip injury. Somebody's going to eat in this game. It'll probably be Debo, but it's a really, really good matchup for Jennings underneath. Two receivers, it's hard to get there on this week that look like extremely low floor plays. Jaylen Waddle and Marvin Harrison. Jaylen Waddle's fantasy season has just come to a screeching halt. Like, not only is he behind Achane in target share, he's now behind Jonnu Smith. In the 3 games that Tua has played this season in full in weeks 1, 8, and 9, Waddle is 4th in target share at 13% behind Tyreek at 24, Achane at 21, and Jonnu at 14%. The volume is just not here. Waddle's targets per route run is easily a career low at 0.17. It's dipped 59%. His targets per route run has dipped 59% over the last 2 years, year over year. And the only thing really here in Waddle's corner is 2 things. His matchup's amazing, and this game could shoot out, but he's 4th on the team in targets, guys. I mean, it's gone from bad to worse with Waddle at this point. I was holding out a little bit of hope when Tua came back that, hey, maybe the volume will come back. Maybe we'll get some more of the first reads back. But this is a different offense this year between Tyreek and Achane breaking out. Tyreek's obviously going to remain the alpha wide receiver 1, creates offense on his own. But Achane is starting to create offense on his own as well. And it's just killed Waddle. Unfortunately, it's just killed Waddle. Marvin Harrison has just been going as far as Kyler Murray takes him. Obviously, Kyler was great 2 weeks ago against Miami and then fell off the map. Last week, obviously, they didn't really have to do much to beat Chicago. They dusted the Bears. The Bears offense just could not muster anything, and the Cardinals just kind of took their foot off the gas, ran the ball a ton in that second half. Kyler only threw it 20 times last week. I think he's going to have to throw it a lot more this week, but this is a worst possible matchup just in terms of like the on paper stuff. Obviously, DJ Reed, Sauce Gardner, dealing with those 2 guys against the Jets it's tough for anybody, especially for a rookie. The Jets are allowing negative 5.3 schedule adjusted fantasy points per game below average. That's the 4th fewest mark among defenses. And, they do play a lot of 1 high single coverage, but that is good for Marv. He's been beating single coverage, but these are the 2 guys that can hold it down with the best of them. All right, let's move it on to tight ends. TJ Hockenson is my buy low of the week. We have been crushing the buy lows at tight end. Hockenson is probably the easiest buy low call of the season, though. It's not too hard to follow. Darnold's playing well enough to definitely support him and Jefferson as fantasy viable options, and the role is going to come up. Hockenson was limited a little bit last week, 53% route involvement, got 4 targets. That should come up to 70, 80% this week and in the coming weeks. Hockenson projects much better this week, and this is a great matchup. I mean, it's just the Jags, man. I mean, they're a bad secondary, giving up a ton of fantasy points to receivers and tight ends. Last 5 weeks, Jags have given up 30 grabs, 350 yards, 4 touchdowns, nearly 18 PPR fantasy points per game to tight ends. That's like, George Kittle is averaging 18 fantasy points per game. Hawk, really good play this week. 2 guys that are not so good plays this week, way far down in projections. Sam Laporta. We've had the Sam Laporta conversation, I think, back in like week 2 or 3, where I was like, man, JMO looks legit. He's earning first reads. They're giving him legitimate, like, not just deep stuff, like running vertical shots down the boundary. Like, he's getting over the middle of the field targets, in breaking stuff, horizontal crossers, stuff to get him in space. It's killed Sam Laporta. 6 games together with JMO. Laporta has earned just 15 targets in 6 games, 8% target share, is 34th among tight ends. The volume's just not there. It's just not there for Laporta. It's not there because the offense has changed for the same reasons it's kind of changed, like we talked about with Jaylen Waddle. Goff has only thrown it 25 times in Goff has not thrown it more than 25 times in 6 straight games. I think the volume should come up a little bit for Detroit this week again, but terrible matchup. Houston has really done a great job against tight ends this season. They haven't played many good ones, but they're holding NFL tight ends to 20 yards per game. I mean, that's stellar. Maybe, okay, yeah, you haven't faced a whole lot of talented options. Definitely not one as talented as Sam Laporta, but holding tight ends to 20 yards per game is stellar stuff. On the same vein, same game, sitting Dalton Schultz. I don't think he should be on a roster really at this point outside of tight end premium leagues. He's not finished better than tight end 19 in a single game this season. And Detroit is the fourth toughest matchup by schedule adjusted fantasy points per game below average. That's going to do it. As always, make sure you're checking out the Final Point show with myself, John Hansen, and Tom Brawley. On Sunday mornings, we walk through all of your start-sit questions to help make sure your lineups are as tight as possible. Love hearing from you guys. Love answering your questions and making sure you guys are crushing. If you could please, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Please like this video. Leave a comment down below. It really does help us out in the algorithm. And I hope that you guys have a fantastic week 10. I'll see you at the top of the leaderboards.